I didn't vanish overnight. It only looked that way from the outside. To the world, it seemed sudden. One day I was there, the next I was gone. The house sold. The furniture cleared out. No forwarding address, no explanations, just silence. But the truth is, my disappearance took years to form. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life, I believed endurance was love. I believed swallowing pain quietly was what mothers did. I believed that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, stayed quiet enough, I would always have a place. I was wrong. The apartment I live in now is small. One bedroom. One window that lets in the morning light. No shouting. No tension hanging in the air. No footsteps that make my stomach tighten. For the first time in decades, I wake up without bracing myself. And now that I am safe, I can finally tell the truth. I didn't run because I was confused. I ran because I understood everything with terrifying clarity. My son, my only child, had become someone I no longer recognized, and his wife wasn't just cruel. She was strategic. Together, they treated me less like a mother and more like an obstacle that needed to be moved. Or removed. People don't notice when older women start disappearing emotionally. We fade quietly. We're still physically present, still cooking meals, still paying bills, still opening our homes, but no one really sees us. We become background noise in our own lives. That's what I had become. For years, I told myself it was normal. That families change, that children grow distant, that I was being too sensitive. Every time I felt hurt, I talked myself out of it. Every time something felt wrong, I explained it away. Until the day I couldn't anymore. It started on an ordinary afternoon. The kind of gray day where time moves slowly and nothing feels urgent, until it suddenly does. My son walked into the kitchen with that familiar look I had learned to fear. The one that always meant he wanted something. And this time, what he asked for wasn't small. It was the moment I should have said no. The moment I should have protected myself. Instead, I smiled. I didn't know then that this simple request would expose a plan so cold, so calculated, that it would force me to choose between remaining useful or surviving. And once I saw the truth, there was no going back. Because the next thing I discovered would shatter every illusion I still had, my son didn't ease into it. He never did. He stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes not quite meeting mine. I was stirring a pot on the stove, doing what I'd done for decades, feeding people who no longer saw me. "Mama," he said, dragging the word out in that familiar tone. The tone that meant this conversation was already decided in his head. I turned toward him with the smile I had perfected over the years. The smile that said, "I'm listening, I won't argue, I'll understand." "What is it, sweetheart?" he sighed, as if I were the inconvenience. "I need your credit cards, all of them." I laughed softly, thinking it was a joke. "All of them?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Just for the week. Kendra and I have some things to take care of." Something inside me tightened. He had borrowed money before. He had needed help before, but never all 3 cards at once. Never with that tone, impatient, irritated, almost rehearsed. "What kind of things?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "Important things, don't worry about it." Don't worry about it. Those words echoed louder than anything else he said. I should have pressed him. I should have demanded details. I should have trusted the discomfort crawling up my spine like a warning flare. Instead, I opened my wallet. I handed over the cards one by one, like I was surrendering something far more valuable than plastic. He took them without a thank you, without a kiss on the cheek, without even pretending this was hard for him. As he walked away, I heard laughter in the hallway. Not his, hers. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that terrified me. What if this isn't about need at all? The next few days were strange. They barely came home. When they did, they were distracted, secretive, whispering behind closed doors. If I entered a room, conversations stopped. Phones were flipped face down. Smiles disappeared. I tried to check my accounts online. Error message, I called the bank. "Everything looks fine," they told me, but nothing felt fine. Then, on Friday night, my son appeared at my bedroom door with his jacket already on. "We're going out of town," he said casually. "Might be gone a few days." No explanation, no details. Just another statement delivered like an order. The house felt wrong after they left, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. The next morning, I cleaned. I always cleaned when I was anxious. Counters, floors, shelves, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. That's when I found it. His old phone. Still plugged in, still on, still unlocked. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding. I knew I shouldn't touch it. I knew this would cross a line. But some instincts are louder than manners. I picked it up. And with one tap, I opened a door that could never be closed again. Because what I read next wasn't just disrespect. It was a plan. A plan that proved my worst fear wasn't paranoia at all. It was preparation. And once I saw how far it went, I understood exactly why I had to disappear. The phone felt heavier than it should have in my hands. It was warm, like it had been used recently, and that alone made my pulse quicken. The screen glowed softly, innocent-looking, as if it wasn't holding the power to destroy what little piece I had left. At the top of the screen was a group chat. The name alone made my throat tighten. Her family. I told myself I would just glance. One message. Enough to calm the unease crawling under my skin. I didn't want to snoop, I wanted reassurance. Proof that I was imagining things. I didn't get reassurance. The first message I read made my knees go weak. She won't notice, she never checks anything. I scrolled. Laughter, jokes, casual cruelty wrapped in emojis. Another message appeared, this one from her mother. Older women like her are predictable, just keep her distracted. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. They were talking about me, not vaguely, not indirectly, explicitly. Like I wasn't a person, just a problem to be managed. I kept scrolling, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. She's paying for everything without knowing, someone wrote. Hotels, dinners, shopping, might as well enjoy it, another replied. My breath caught. They weren't just borrowing my cards. They were emptying them, deliberately, joyfully. Then I saw his name, my son. I feel bad sometimes, he had written. But she's old. She doesn't need all that space or money anymore. Old, as if that explained everything. Another message followed almost immediately from his wife. Stop feeling guilty. This is smart. Once everything's in place, she won't even realize what happened. Everything. I scrolled faster now, tears blurring the screen. That's when I saw the messages that changed everything. They weren't just spending my money. They were planning my future without me. She won't fight it, one message said. She doesn't have anyone else, said another. If we document a few confused moments, the lawyer says it'll be easy. Document confused moments. Lawyer. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. They were discussing power of attorney, guardianship, control. Someone suggested recording me when I forgot small things. Someone else joked that isolation would make it easier. And then the sentence that split something open inside my chest. She's obedient, always has been. Obedient. That's how they saw me, not as a mother, not as a human being, but as something trained to comply. I read for hours. Plans. Phases, timelines, jokes about where I would live once everything was sorted. By the time I put the phone down, the sun was setting. I felt hollow, stripped raw, but beneath the grief something else was forming. Not fear, resolve. Because they had made one fatal mistake. They believed I was too weak to act, and that belief was about to cost them everything. Because from that moment on, I stopped being their victim and started becoming their problem. I didn't scream, I didn't throw the phone, I didn't collapse the way people imagine betrayal should look. I sat very still. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock in the hallway. Each second sounded louder than the last, as if time itself was reminding me that something irreversible had just happened. They thought I was fragile. They thought my silence meant weakness. What they didn't understand was that silence can also be observation, and I had been observing for years. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it. Plugged in, screen dark, no sign it had ever been touched. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of tea, even though my hands were shaking so badly I spilled some onto the counter. That was the moment it shifted. The tears came, yes, but not endlessly. Not helplessly. They came and then they stopped, because something inside me hardened into clarity. I could not stay, not for one more conversation, not for one more family discussion, not for one more manipulation wrapped in concern. If I stayed, they would finish what they started, and they were counting on my hesitation. They were counting on my love to keep me still. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the door frames. Every corner held a memory, some beautiful, some painful. This place had been my shelter, but it had also become my cage. I realized something then that changed everything. A house is only safe when the people inside it are safe. By morning, my grief had transformed into something colder and far more powerful. Strategy. The first thing I did was make copies, screenshots, messages, names, dates. I sent everything to my own phone, then to a private email account I created that morning. I didn't know yet what I would do with the evidence, but I knew I needed it. Next, I called the one person who had never treated me like I was disposable. My neighbor, my friend. When she arrived, I didn't explain. I just handed her the phone and said, "Please read this." She did. By the time she looked up, her face had gone pale. "This is abuse," she said quietly, "and you need to get out." Those words felt like permission. That afternoon, we made a list. Lawyer, bank, real estate agent, packing essentials. Not emotions, not explanations. Actions, they had a timeline. Now, so did I. They thought they had weeks. They didn't realize I only needed days. Because while they were enjoying luxury and laughter, I was preparing something they would never recover from. And by the time they came back, the life they were trying to steal would already be gone. But first, I had to do the unthinkable, something that would shock them more than my disappearance ever could. The lawyer didn't react the way I expected. I thought he would frown, hesitate, tell me to slow down. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "You still own everything. That gives you power." Power? I hadn't thought of myself as powerful in years. I laid out the evidence calmly, screenshots, dates, conversations. I didn't cry, I didn't rant. I simply told the truth. He listened carefully, his expression growing darker with every page. "What they're planning is financial exploitation," he said finally. "And worse, they're laying groundwork to strip you of your legal autonomy." My chest tightened. Hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "What do I do?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said the words that made my heart lurch. "You sell the house." I stared at him. Sell the house. The place I had lived in for decades, the walls that held my memories. The only thing that had ever truly been mine. He continued gently. "Once it's sold, there's nothing left for them to take. No leverage, no control." I felt dizzy. The house wasn't just property, it was proof of my life. Proof that I had built something, survived something, endured something. But then I remembered their messages. "She won't fight it. She doesn't have anyone else. She's obedient." They didn't see the house as my home, they saw it as their reward. That's when it clicked. Keeping the house wasn't honoring my past, it was endangering my future. I agreed. That same day I called the bank. All cards were frozen, charges flagged, investigations opened. The woman on the phone spoke kindly, but I could hear the concern in her voice as she listed the amounts already spent. It didn't matter anymore. Next came the real estate agent. "I need a fast sale," I told her. "No delays," she blinked. "That usually means accepting less." "I understand," I said. "Freedom is expensive." By the end of the day, the machine was moving. Paperwork, appointments, timelines, no emotions, just momentum. That night, I walked through the house again, but this time it felt different. Not like goodbye, like release. I wasn't abandoning my life. I was rescuing it. They thought I was waiting. They thought I was confused. They thought I was still deciding. What they didn't know was that the most dangerous version of a woman like me is the one who has finally decided she has nothing left to lose. And I was just getting started. Because the next step wasn't just leaving, it was making sure they could never follow. Once the decision was made, everything moved quickly, almost too quickly. That was intentional. The faster I acted, the less time doubt had to creep in. The less time guilt could weaken my resolve. I treated my escape the way someone treats an emergency evacuation. Take only what matters, leave the rest behind. I packed quietly. Not everything, just what couldn't be replaced. Documents, photos, a few pieces of clothing. Small objects that carried meaning instead of weight. Everything else stayed. Furniture, dishes, decorations, evidence of a life I was no longer willing to defend. Each box felt lighter than the last. I didn't leave a note. Not yet. First, I closed doors carefully. I opened a new bank account in a different city. I transferred my savings in person, standing at the counter with a calm I didn't feel. The teller verified my identity twice, then smiled politely, unaware that she was helping me disappear. Utilities were scheduled for cancellation. Subscriptions ended. Mail forwarding redirected. Every loose thread tied off. I became invisible one system at a time. At night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the quiet, imagining the moment they would return, expecting familiarity and finding nothing. I imagined the confusion, the anger, the panic. And strangely, I felt no guilt. Because guilt belongs to people who do wrong, I was protecting myself. The sale of the house finalized faster than anyone expected. Cash buyer, minimal questions, papers signed in a single afternoon. When I placed my signature on the final document, my hand didn't shake. That surprised me. I thought it would hurt more. Instead, I felt relief. The house was no longer bait. That evening, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The echo of my footsteps reminded me how alone I had already been even before I decided to leave. This wasn't abandonment. It was honesty. The night before I left, I slept somewhere else. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want my last memory there to be loneliness. Early the next morning, before sunrise, I left the city. No dramatic goodbye, no tears at the station. Just a bag at my feet and a window seat facing forward. As the landscape changed, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, peace. I didn't know exactly what waited for me on the other side. I only knew this: no one would ever trap me again. But even as the miles grew between us, I knew one thing remained unfinished. They still thought they were in control. They still believed I had disappeared out of weakness. And soon, very soon, they were going to learn just how wrong they were. Because what I left behind wasn't silence. It was consequences. They returned expecting routine. Keys in hand, bags over their shoulders, minds already rehearsing the next step of their plan. Instead, they found silence. The house wasn't just empty, it was erased. No furniture, no photos, no familiar smells, no trace that I had ever lived there, except for the echo of their own footsteps bouncing back at them. At first, they thought it was a mistake. Wrong address, wrong door. Then panic set in. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as voices rose, disbelief turning into shouting. My son tried the locks again and again, as if persistence could undo reality. His wife stood frozen, phone in hand, scrolling frantically, bank apps, messages, anything that could explain what was happening. That's when the truth began to surface. The house was sold. Legally, completely, irreversibly. The new owners didn't argue. They didn't explain beyond what was necessary. Paperwork spoke for itself. A signature they recognized but never thought I'd use that way. Mine. The police were called. Not on me, but on them when anger turned into threats and desperation crossed lines. By the end of the night, they understood one thing clearly. I wasn't confused, I wasn't passive, and I was gone. The next morning, the bank notifications started arriving for them. Cards frozen, charges flagged, investigations opened. Questions asked they couldn't answer without exposing themselves. That's when the letter arrived. Not handwritten, typed, precise. No emotion wasted. It explained nothing they didn't already know, only confirmed that I knew everything too. That I had seen the messages. The plans, the jokes, the assumptions. It didn't ask for apologies. It didn't offer forgiveness. It closed a door. They tried to find me. Calls, emails. Messages sent through people who barely knew me, some angry. Some pleading, some pretending concern. None reached me, because I had chosen peace over explanation. I heard later, through others, how quickly their confidence collapsed, how accusations replaced unity, how blame bounced between them like a weapon. I wasn't there to witness it. I didn't need to be. Distance did what confrontation never could. In another city, in a small space that belonged only to me, I slept without fear. I woke without dread. I made coffee without bracing for footsteps behind me. I existed again. They lost what they thought was theirs. I gained something they never understood: freedom. And yet, even as my new life settled into place, there was one final truth I had to face, one that would decide how this story truly ended. Because disappearing was only the beginning. What mattered most was what I chose to become after. And in the final chapter, I'll tell you what I gained when I finally chose myself. I thought freedom would feel loud. I imagined it would arrive with celebration, relief so strong it would knock the breath out of me. But freedom didn't announce itself that way. It came quietly, like morning light slipping through the blinds. At first, it felt unfamiliar. I woke up in a small apartment where no one expected anything from me. No favors. No explanations. No sacrifices disguised as love. The silence wasn't empty, it was spacious. I filled it slowly. A chair by the window where I drink my coffee. A lamp I chose because I liked it, not because it matched anyone else's taste. Photographs that make me smile instead of ache. Plants I care for every morning, watching them grow at their own pace. For the first time, my life belonged to me. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to others. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped shrinking myself to keep the peace. That peace had never been real anyway. Some nights, memories still come. Not the betrayal, I've made peace with that, but the version of myself who believed love meant endurance. I grieve her gently. She did the best she could with what she knew, and I thank her. Because without her patience, I wouldn't recognize my strength now. I don't know what became of them, and I don't ask. Distance did what anger never could, it healed me. I learned that closure doesn't come from apologies, it comes from clarity. I was not wrong. I was not cruel. I was not selfish. I was brave. Starting over at my age terrified me. But staying would have destroyed me. And survival, I learned, sometimes looks like walking away without permission. Now my days are simple. I read, I walk, I create. I laugh more than I expected to. I've met people who see me, not as a resource, not as a burden, but as a whole human being. I don't need much anymore, just peace, just dignity, just choice. And that's what I want anyone reading this to understand. If you are being diminished, manipulated, or quietly erased, especially by those who claim to love you, you are not imagining it. You are not weak for noticing. And you are not wrong for wanting more. It is never too late to choose yourself. I didn't disappear because I was afraid. I disappeared because I finally understood my worth. And in doing so, I didn't lose my life. I found it.